Hi, my name is Ava Kvapil. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Long Beach, California. I'm a tattoo artist, and my pronouns are she, her, they, them. Uh, so I'm half Okinawan or Uchinanchu in Okinawan language. My other half is white, a little bit of a mix of things. Biggest chunk is Czech, so I guess I kind of claim that a little bit too. And I'm Yonsei, so my mom is from Hawaii originally, and my great-grandparents were the ones who immigrated from Okinawa.
Okay, perfect. So, how would you describe your art medium of Hajichi?
Yeah, so Hajichi is a traditional Ryukyuan Okinawan tattooing practice. It was traditionally for women on their hands, and sometimes onto the wrist and arms as well. And that goes back at least several hundred years, possibly more. There's a lot of documentation about it that's kind of been lost over the years. But yeah, Hajichi is maybe about 50% of my tattoo work. I also do just, regular personal tattoos of my own style.
So, what made you want to pursue your art forms or Hajichi?
Okay. So when I started tattooing about 3.5 years ago, I actually didn't really know anything about Hajichi. I think being Yonsei, a lot of cultural history is kind of diluted or forgotten. And specifically with Hajichi, because it was banned due to Japanese colonization of Ryukyu, the practice slowly started dying out and pretty much went dead by like the late 1900s. So it was just not really talked about. So my family didn't really have a lot of knowledge about it, but I ended up coming across it through just the internet, I think, and like my brother, I think he found it through the internet or something. And specifically when I started tattooing, it was the beginning of the pandemic. So during that time, there were a lot of like Ryukyuans online starting to like follow each other and like resource share and like just kind of get more into like cultural revival in a sense. So Hajichi was like a big like subject of like talk for a lot of people because people were really curious about this practice that was kind of like erased. So I sort of got into it at that perfect time where I started tattooing and then started learning more about like my cultural history and like connecting more with community people, and then there just kind of became more of an interest for people to get Hajichi, and I kind of was able to learn along the way, I guess.
Yeah, so when you talk about like you found it through the internet, was it through like certain forums or like websites or like social media?
There's kind of like a lot of things just floating around. Actually, at the time, it was really hard to find a lot of resources, at least in English. And like I didn't grow up speaking or learning Japanese really. I mean, now I've kind of like learned a bit of katakana and hiragana, but like trying to actually find resources in English is hard because I can't read like, academic kanji. So yeah, well, when the pandemic started, maybe it was a little bit before that, there was a Discord server that started that was like the Shimanchu Discord, and Shimanchu kind of refers to like, it's like an Okinawan word that kind of refers to like, just like general Ryukyuans as a whole, because we're a little bit diverse with there being so many islands. But yeah, there was a Discord server that became like a big hub of like resource sharing, and so I think I got like invited to that somehow. And then also, I can't remember if this was like before or after I started learning about Hajichi, but there is this podcast called Ichariba Chode, which is basically run by a bunch of like Okinawan diaspora folks that I'm friends with, and each of their episodes covers like different topics relating to Okinawan culture or like social, political issues. So that was kind of like a good educational resource too. And they do have an episode where they kind of went over like the history of Hajichi and all of that. So that was a big thing, yeah.
That's really cool. What do you aspire to accomplish through Hajichi?
What do I aspire to accomplish? I don't know. A lot of it has just been a way of like connecting with my Uchinanshu community. Growing up in Long Beach, I didn't really grow up with any other Okinawans, let alone even just like Japanese people or East Asians. So a big part of even just like doing this cultural tattoo work has been like kind of just getting to reconnect with people and like build a community. And it's like a way of giving back to the community too, because for so many people that come to me for Hajichi, it's just a way of like, connecting with their ancestors, connecting with their family, just really getting in touch with themselves on like a personal, spiritual, family level. So I guess, just honestly just doing more of that and just kind of it being this uplifting practice for everyone and just getting it more visible out there because there's so many people that don't know about it.
Where would you say you draw inspiration from? Because you did mention that like you didn't grow up around other Uchinanshu people.
Yeah. Inspiration, I mean, my family, even though I was kind of isolated here in Long Beach, as far as like knowing other people, my family's been pretty like open and proud about being Okinawan and kind of always distinguish that from Japanese. I think it helps a little bit that my family all comes from Hawaii, so there's more Okinawan community there, and they have, the Okinawan festival and everything, so I think there's already like that distinct, like, we know what Okinawans are, we know what Japanese are, and, we're knowledgeable about the history of everything. So that was something just openly talked about and like celebrated in my family, and like, I remember like as a kid, we would watch like, we had like this one random like VHS tape of like this traditional like Okinawan dance group that would do like folk dances, and that was something like I like loved as a kid. So for me, like Okinawan culture was something I always wanted to like learn like more and more about, but it was just like hard to access because there's like not a ton of like clear information on the internet. At least growing up, there wasn't a lot of like stuff out there, really.
Do you have any dream collaborations that you like to work with?
That's a good question. I've kind of already done a few. I have a friend online. We still haven't met in person. Their name is Kyle Yukawa, and they're illustrator, artist, primarily digital work. But we've collaborated just through like meeting on the internet through the whole Shimanchu online community, and we've done some like collab like illustrations that are very like centered around Okinawan themes. So we've kind of incorporated my more like abstract style and like Hajichi knowledge with like their they do a lot of like drawings of like people, and it's like very colorful, so it was kind of a fun like mashup of our two styles, and we got a lot of like positive feedback from that. I guess you could say technically I've like collabed with other Hajicha, which are other Hajichi artists, in the sense that a lot of us, since we're kind of spread around in the US and in Brazil and Japan, we've some of us have all tattooed like the same people at different times. So like as people have expanded their Hajichi over time, like they might come to me, and then to Moeko and like Okinawa, and then Hiromi in Brazil, just depending on circumstance. So like in a way, like us all tattooing the same people has kind of been a collaboration. So that's been really cool. I guess maybe like something that could be like really cool is like somehow if we were able to tattoo like the same person at the same time. If that was ever like a situation that like made sense, because I know some tattoo artists, not necessarily Hajichi, but just like regular tattoo artists where they've done like collabs where it's like two people tattooing the same person and like mixing their styles. So I could kind of see that with Hajichi. That could be cool. Yeah.
I never really thought of like tattooing the same person could be considered collaboration.
Yeah, no, it's like totally a thing, and it's like that seems really intense if you're like the person getting tattooed. It's just like double the pain. But
Two different spots.
Yeah.
But some people are into that because they just like want to get it over with. And they're like, oh my god, two artists that I love here at the same place. Let's just do it now. So
it's like getting all 4 wisdom teeth taken out at the same time.
Yeah, it's like just bang it out. Yeah, might as well.
What do you like to express the most in your art? Like, is there any type of emotion or history or any other type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like subtle emotion behind it. I mean, it's not something I'm always like super thinking about in the moment, maybe just because like tattooing is very like physically rigorous sometimes, but I guess one thing that comes to mind is like a lot of my Hajichi sessions, I tend to play like ryukyu and like traditional music in the background, so it feels like nice to pay homage to, well, I guess in Okinawan culture there's a big thing with like ancestral like worship and just like awareness. That's just like a big part of like the spiritual history, so I think that always like comes into play with Hajichi work. And that's something like a lot of my clients really care about, is like, you know, even thinking about like, oh, I'm getting Hajichi just like my great grandma or my grandma had. So it's like a way of like kind of connecting with someone they might have never known in that sense. And a lot of Hajichi in the past had to do with kind of like growth as a woman or growth as an individual, and like life milestones over time. So I think that's something that's really big. Yeah, but I don't know, my own personal emotions, I don't know, it's always so like heavy yet light at the same time. It's heavy thinking about this practice that was really, you know, stigmatized eventually because of, you know, Japanese rule, unfortunately. So there's things about it that are like really sad, like cultural things that were lost and like trauma that, you know, people went through for having the tattoos, but then it is really light at the same time, like knowing that, you know, at least the privilege of that I have being in the US, of it being a really like happy thing that we can bring back, and it's awesome to see it like alive and breathing again, the practice. So yeah, it's just it's a whole ball of emotions all the time. It's a lot.
How do you feel that your Nikkei identity plays a role in your art, especially being Yonsei and
Uchinanchu.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm still like figuring it out. I think for a long time, I think being half white, and also just naturally looking kind of ambiguous to a lot of people. There are times that I didn't feel very like, you know, Asian enough or Okinawan enough, or even just going through phases of starting to refer to myself as just Japanese because it was easier to explain to people. And I guess maybe now things have changed in that now that I'm doing work that's so centered in like Okinawan culture, I don't refer to myself as like Japanese anymore, just because it's you know, it's something I've recognized as like distinct, that we have our own history. So in that sense, I've kind of like reclaimed that for myself. Yeah, no shade to Japanese people, just, you know, just learning to like re-accept our own differences, I guess. But yeah, so I guess it's made me more like proud of my identity doing my work. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's awesome. Final question. What has the journey been like reviving the Uchinanchu Hajichi?
It's been a lot. You know, it's been hard. It's been like confusing. It's been scary even. I think just because it's hard when you're working with tech, like as far as like historical texts and academic texts, there's a lot of things that are skewed as far as like certain biases. Like a lot of authors that wrote about Hajichi are not necessarily Okinawan themselves. Are often Japanese or Westerners. So it's like you're trying to understand a practice through a lens that's not necessarily like accurate or has some sort of negative perspective, because there's a lot of writings about Hajichi that are like, oh, you know, this barbaric practice is so interesting and we're kind of glad that it's like going away, but we still want to like study it just for the sake of it's fascinating. But so that part is weird, and because of that you're working with some inaccuracies. You're like worried about doing things correctly, and or like what does correct look like, and so some things you do kind of have to go just based on your own interpretation a little bit. But I think that's also where like having a community to kind of like have discourse with is important too, so we can kind of like get an understanding of like how do people feel about this approach or this approach. But that's also scary too, because not everyone's gonna agree on like what's the best way to do something. So, you know, at the end of the day, like my practice isn't gonna please every single Ryukyuan Okinawan person, but you know, I definitely try to do my best in being as educated as I can, as open as I can, as respectful as I can. So yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of like back and forth with the community, but it's been good overall, and I think it's moving in a good trajectory.
Yeah, it must be crazy because like you mentioning earlier about like the not being able to read like certain Japanese or uchinashi,
Oh, yeah, like
that translation barrier
yeah.
must have to play a role in whoever's translating it too.
Yeah, that's like a huge thing. Like they're only recently became like came out. This guy came out with these a compilation of books from a bunch of different Hajichi texts that he translated into English. So then like reading that was before written in Japanese, that was written by someone with like a certain perspective. It's like so many levels of like, I don't know what's like correct anymore. So yeah, things definitely get like skewed and lost in translation through so many levels. Yeah.
I guess the last thing I want to ask, because all the questions are done, I actually want to ask like about the tattoos that you currently have, and like, if you want to go over those.
I'd love to. So yeah, these are both my hands so far. This one, still progress. This one, I did myself. It was actually the second time I've done Hajichi. So it was kind of a way for me to like practice and like learn about it, because like doing like tattooing hands was so new for me and scary, because that in itself is like requires some technical experience. But yeah, this one is sort of considered sometimes like a shuri royalty style from Uchina Island, which is Okinawa. Shuri used to be the capital, the royal capital of Okinawa. And I've honestly never personally seen this kind of more fine style on someone's hands, like actually documented in a photo, but there's like illustration, like records of it documented, and it was supposedly considered a style that could have been worn by people in the royal court, like potentially even like a princess or a queen or something like that. But yeah, generally the Okinawa style tends to be more thick than this, so this is pretty uncommon. Usually these like finger spears are like much thicker, and the whole hand in general is much more like bold, blacked out. But I think a lot of people these days gravitate towards this style just because going really bold can be like a lot for people, and people just prefer something a little more subtle. And these days I don't think class is a huge deal, or shouldn't be, and obviously there's not a lot of people that are like connected to the royal family necessarily. So it's like, it's fun to bring back kind of a rare style that like, you know, we can just interpret how we want a little bit. And the open circle isn't necessarily traditional, but that was something I just kind of wanted to play with. Normally it's like filled in. And I don't know, I think that was just my own personal touch, and maybe in the future I would want to fill it in, so I kind of just leave that open. Okay, so this hand features these two dots that my friend Hiromi from Brazil, she's a Hajichi there. She's probably like one of the most prolific artists there, since there's a really big diaspora in Brazil. I think the biggest outside of Okinawa. So these are called tontomi, or sometimes tomibajiki. There's a couple other names I might be forgetting. They're supposed to represent like mud skippers or mud skipper eyes, not entirely sure. But typically, like young girls would get these done as kind of like the first element in their hajichi. The ones I've seen normally are like kind of bigger blobs than this, more like a bigger oval shape that like covers this part a little more. But I kind of wanted her to do like a smaller version of that, just because I wasn't sure moving forward what I would get in the future. So kind of smaller is better if I wanted to like have these fit in. But yeah, so those are tontomi, and I think people would get them as like children or like adolescents. So it's like the very first stage of hajichi sometimes. And yeah, in the future, I plan to get my hand filled in by another artist, because I'm also left-handed. So, I mean, I'm right-handed, so I need someone else to do it for me.
Yeah, I think we got the rest of the... Yeah, unless you wanted to add anything else?
Well, Nihei Debiru for having me. That means thank you in Uchinaguchi. Okay, yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
I was like, I should just throw in some Uchinaguchi there if I can.